Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it's a Wednesday morning. Great to be back with you. It is Wednesday, July 22nd, 2026. And thanks to Vanessa Denhagarmo for filling in for me yesterday. You know, technology is wonderful when it works, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And yesterday was one of those days. So I called V, and she stepped up to the plate as always and did a great job of guest hosting. So we're still having a little bit of a technical issue. I may sound a little bit different than I do normally, but we are working on it. We have our crack engineering team looking to things, but we have a show, and you know what they say, the show must go on, and we have a great one for you today. Very excited. We're going to have our weekly update with our friends at Live Action. Kimberly Bird is joining us, and she recently organized an important press conference with several members of Congress regarding the refunding of Planned Parenthood, and we'll get an update on that as well as other breaking pro-life news. And there's always something, right? It's a Wednesday, so you know what that means. Shrines and Wonders Wednesday, of course. And we are going to be taking a look at where the Pope visited yesterday. Of course, he's still on vacation until the 27th, July 27th, spending most of the time at Castel Gandolfo, just south of Rome. But yesterday he ventured quite a bit south, about 2 hours south, and he was on the border of the region of Lazio, where Rome is located, and Campania, to the beautiful, amazing, incredible shrine of Monte Cassino. That is an incredible place. And a lot of people, unfortunately, when they are heading down south, maybe they've done their Rome trip already and they're going down to the Amalfi Coast or maybe even further south over on the other side to the Adriatic. It's right along the main freeway, and you can see it. It's just this towering, beautiful structure. It's just phenomenal. It was rebuilt after World War II, of course. But that's where St. Benedict and St. Scholastica, even though they're from Umbria, are buried. And he spent time there, went to the tomb of St. Benedict and had lunch with the Benedictines. But that's a place you really need to visit. The structure itself is magnificent. And the views from that area of the mountains there in southern Lazio, northern Campania, are just stunning. So we'll take you there to Monte Cassino, and then we'll take you back up a little bit further north of Monte Cassino to the Eternal City, back to the Eternal City of Rome. Joan Lewis with us with all the late breaking news out of the Vatican. And that is the first hour of the show. Second hour of the show, have you ever heard of this new thing among young people with social media called Looksmaxxing? Yeah, I'll explain. But it's in connection with this young man who's only 20 years old and is already a multimillionaire. And he's getting a lot of press, not all of it good, because he's like the male version of everything that's wrong with the pressure of social media. And not that he's a bad young man, he's successful. He's very creative. He's you know, technologically savvy, but he's very into appearances. And what the research is showing, and this ties in with a new story about France banning social media for teens under 15, is that men are now facing the same pressures that we women have always faced for decades in terms of pressures to look and, you know, model yourself after someone on TV or in print. So we'll discuss in 2 cents, and then really looking forward to conversing with my dear friend Lewis Brown, who is the executive director of the Christ Medicus Foundation. He's going to take a look at the U.S. Religious Liberty Commission, the draft report that was recently released. We'll have 2 segments with Lewis. So that is the show, as we say in the news business and the media business in general. That's the rundown. And we'll take a look, of course, at the weather. There's a lot of news stories weather-wise, which we'll have in the news for you coming up in just a minute or so. But the National Weather Service is saying we have scattered thunderstorms with severe gusts, hail, and a tornado risk that are possible near a cold front from the Ohio Valley to the Mid-Atlantic. We have Tropical Storm Bertha expected to bring tropical storm conditions to portions of the Gulf Coast and the Panhandle in Florida into Louisiana through Wednesday. And we're also, of course, watching the heat wave that is out in California. They're still affected by that. So that's a look at the weather today on a Wednesday and our rundown, as we say in the biz. Right now, already 4 minutes past the hour, and we need to get started with the news for you on a Wednesday. So here we go. Well, designed by God, guided by love, open to life. That's the theme of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops 2026 Natural Family Planning Awareness Week campaign. As EWTNnews.com tells us, the bishops' annual campaign began on Sunday and runs through the end of this week, highlighting God's design for married love, the gift of life, and the Church's teaching on NFP methods. To educate people on the matter, the NFP program of the USCCB is developing a poster each year, which they already have out now, of course, with supportive materials to be displayed in a number of areas, including parishes, hospitals, NFP classrooms, marriage preparation sites, doctors' offices, family life centers, and campus ministry centers. Back in 1981, the Catholic Church in the U.S. working to strengthen efforts to make natural family planning and church teaching more widely known and used. And to further the mission, the Bishops' Conference established the NFP program. In other news this morning, Nathan Morley with the Vatican News Department says a death toll from Venezuela's devastating twin earthquakes now numbering into the thousands, but it still could rise.
There were 1,400 aftershocks following the two main earth movers which shook a nation and an entire continent. National Assembly President Jorge Rodriguez says the official death toll is now 5,208, while more than 16,000 people have been injured. This will rise, but the full extent of the loss of life won't ever be totally calculated. The coastal state of Huara is worst affected. Large areas will take years to build back. International aid agencies who are providing emergency funding are warning of disease, especially due to chronic lack of fresh water. It's a gargantuan challenge for interim President Delcy Rodriguez and her administration. Washington's pledged $150 million worth of help, but is still holding the whip hand on an array of economic sanctions plus strictures over a nation grievously suffering. National catastrophes do and can happen to any nation at any time, yet the poorest and the least equipped to help their citizens so need humanitarian help. This is a time for olive branches rather than big sticks. For Vatican Radio, James Bliss reporting.
Pope Leo, as we mentioned earlier, making a private visit yesterday to the beautiful Abbey of Monte Cassino, where St. Benedict is buried. The pontiff making that journey while on vacation at Castel Gandolfo, where he will remain, as we mentioned earlier, through the weekend. At Monte Cassino, he prayed at the tomb of St. Benedict, considered the father of Western monasticism. He said, entrusting him with his plea for peace in those regions of the world marked by bloodshed and conflict. The Pope also having a pranzo or lunch with the Benedictine community at the Abbey. Leo's surprise visit there was his first since election to the papacy back in 2025. The Abbey of Monte Cassino, founded by St. Benedict all the way back in 529, will be celebrating the 1500th anniversary of its founding in 2 years, actually 3 years, in 2029. President Trump says Iran desperately wants to meet. He made the comment while speaking in the Oval Office yesterday.
One of the first things we did early in the administration, they would have a nuclear weapon, and you wouldn't have Israel. And in my opinion, you wouldn't have various other countries in the Middle East. They'd all be gone.
This comes as the U.S. has conducted strikes on Iran for 10 straight nights. 3 U.S. soldiers were killed in Iranian attacks on bases in Jordan and Iraq over the weekend. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps also claimed its aerospace force used cruise missiles to destroy Amazon's central data infrastructure in Bahrain in an attack that also targeted U.S. air defense systems. And Secretary of War Pete Hegseth testifying about Iran war funding in the Senate yesterday. With the war escalating, he told the Senate Appropriations Committee that the White House's $88 billion supplemental funding request is critical to ensure America's military readiness across the board.
President Trump's following a simple logic. The military requires a generational investment to deliver on peace through strength.
Hegseth being joined by Joint Chiefs Chair General Dan Kane. His appearance comes following the confirmed recent deaths, as we mentioned, of 2 U.S. soldiers from Iranian strikes in Jordan and another service member death in Iraq during a controlled explosion to destroy an Iranian drone. Several anti-war protesters interrupted the beginning of that hearing. And President Trump has directed the administration to allow U.S. air carriers to fly directly to Lebanon. Trump making the announcement in a post on Truth Social. It comes after Trump met with Lebanese President Joseph Aoun at the White House on Tuesday. Trump said the Lebanese leader has done a remarkable job as he works to transform his country and is excited for Americans to visit Lebanon. But speaking of travel, Monica Nelson tells us the State Department is now warning Americans to stay alert as tensions between the U.S. and Iran continue to rise.
Officials say the security situation remains unpredictable and could escalate without warning. The department notes that U.S. diplomatic facilities have been targeted, including some outside of the Middle East. Americans traveling or living in the region are urged to use extra caution and prepare for possible travel disruptions. The State Department has issued a worldwide travel caution until further notice. I'm Monica Nelson.
Republicans trying to codify President Trump's border security priorities. The push is led by Texas Congressman Chip Roy.
What's it going to take before we work together to make sure the border remains secure, no matter the occupant at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue?
He says if there is a future Democratic president, they could easily roll back when the president has done for national security. The legislation expands Homeland Security's authority over the asylum process. It also establishes new penalties for those who overstay their visas by more than 10 days. And Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega is teasing plans now to do away with elections in his country. He's serving his fourth straight term since taking power in 2007, and he floated the idea of ending elections by next year during a government rally marking the 47th anniversary of the Sandinista Revolution's takeover of that country. And while Ortega asserted that there won't be any more elections, he did not provide details on how voting would be formally scrapped. The U.S. is one of many countries that have accused the Nicaraguan leader of being a dictator, while the UN Human Rights Council has accused the government there of systematic abuses and authoritarian rule. Michael Kastner tells us Department of Health Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. says the cyclosporiasis outbreak is now under control.
His announcement comes as thousands of people in the U.S. have gotten sick from the parasite, with most experiencing severe diarrhea. The Food and Drug Administration had linked the outbreak to shredded iceberg lettuce from a Taylor Farms facility in Mexico. Mexican health authorities, however, said their own investigation didn't find evidence that the outbreak originated there. The majority of the cases have been reported in Michigan, where more than 6,500 cases have been reported. I'm Michael Kastner.
Also out of the health department yesterday, the federal government withholding almost $1 billion in Medicaid for California over fraud concerns. Here's Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. making the announcement yesterday.
We have a duty to stop the payments, demand answers, and then follow the evidence wherever it leads.
The Trump administration says California has seen a huge spike in billing for in-home services, up 24%, compared to a 12% jump across the rest of the country. The governor, Gavin Newsom, posting on social media, the spike isn't about fraud. It's about keeping seniors and people with disabilities out of nursing homes. He claims the fraud claims is a political stunt. Minnesota also seeing money withheld because of those fraud claims. And severe weather, as we mentioned, slamming several parts of the country this week. Reporter Aaron McLaughlin tells us possible tornadoes formed in the New York City area yesterday.
The storm rolling through Manhattan with multiple tornado warnings west of the Big Apple and at least 2 reports of twisters in Morris County, New Jersey.
And tornado and flood watches were issued for more than 30 million people, stretching from the New York City area through Philadelphia and down into parts of the Mid-Atlantic, with powerful storms inflicting rain, heavy rain, and damage across multiple metro areas. It's a Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in to EWTN's Catholic Connection. We'll be right back. Thanks so much for tuning in to Catholic Connection on a Wednesday morning, and we catch up today with all the pro-life activities going on and pro-life breaking news. Kimberly Bird is with us from the wonderful pro-life organization, Live Action. We do a monthly update with them once a month. It's always great to get the latest news. Kimberly, thanks for joining us. So you sent me a very interesting story regarding a press conference that you organized connected to Planned Parenthood and their many issues, and I guess several members of Congress attended. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Teresa. Thank you for having me. Yes, last week on Capitol Hill, we led a coalition with several other prominent pro-life organizations in order to continue to put the pressure on to defund Planned Parenthood, which, as you know, received funding once again beginning July 4th. They had been defunded for 1 year only through the big, beautiful bill that was signed last year, but now they are receiving hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer funding. And so we wanted to just bring everyone's attention again to the need to defund this evil organization. And we did have several members of Congress, Representative Mary Miller, we had Representative Mark Harris, and we even had Senator Josh Hawley there to just continue to express the need of the no need for taxpayers to be funding this organization, abortions, and even cross-sex hormones for minors. It's horrible.
Yeah. And so what do you think is going to happen with this? I mean, how long are we away from defunding them again? Is that still a possibility, you think, in the near future?
So it was as of last week. We were continuing to have conversations about a possible reconciliation 3.0. But as of yesterday, we think that the ship has sailed on that. And so we are just trying to have every conversation we can in order to make sure that it happens after the midterms. That would be a reconciliation 4.0. And so between now and the midterms, that's when not only pro-life organizations, but all taxpayers should be telling their congresswomen, and letting them know that you do not want your money going to fund Planned Parenthood.
You know, with all the money they're getting, and once again here with this funding, you would think that they would just, not that we want them to go about their business because their business is killing people, but they're still targeting, and in a very, very big way, since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, it's gotten even really, extremely aggressive, as you well know. There's lawsuits in several different areas of the country, including a massive lawsuit in California. I just interviewed, as I was telling you during the break, the top attorney from the Thomas More Center, who is representing Heartbeat International. They really want to attack these pregnancy resource centers and bankrupt them, basically. And isn't it kind of shocking, though, considering how big Planned Parenthood is, all the money they make, all the money they can fundraise, all the donations they get from the left, and they're still going after pregnancy resource centers. To me, that is a sign that we are impacting them, don't you think?
Absolutely. So, yes, they receive $832 million every year in taxpayer funding. They kill over 430,000 babies every year. And yet Planned Parenthood says that's not enough. They want to bring down the organizations that actually provide true health care to women. These pregnancy resource centers, there are 20 pregnancy resource centers for every one Planned Parenthood. They offer so much care and love and support to women, children, and families, and they give them an opportunity to see a live action video like Baby Olivia, or to have an ultrasound and actually hear the heartbeat of their child. It's very sad when you see Planned Parenthood say, you know what, it's not enough for us to, these numbers aren't enough. They want to see abortions happen, and it's really, it's very sad. So we definitely, want to keep in our prayers these lawsuits happening, especially with Thomas More Society.
Yeah, it's amazing to me. It's such a case of projection because they accuse us of not caring for women and families, and we only care about the baby, as if caring for a child is a bad thing. But all that you just mentioned, Kimberly, I did a whole opinion piece last week on this and really got into the nitty-gritty of what pregnancy resource centers do. I mean, they are absolutely incredible. And guess what? They don't take any government funding. They do the fundraising on their own. What a concept.
They do, and they really are. They struggle when it comes to finances, and a lot of these pregnancy resource centers are run by retired nurses and volunteers, and they do this because they love women and children. They want to help, and they want to offer a different choice, right? Life as a solution. It's life-affirming care. And that's where we need to really redirect these funds. $832 million in taxpayer funds. Think what that could do with true health care. We could see, just an increase of marriage, family, children in our country if we were to redirect those funds.
Almost $1 billion. That is just, it's so overwhelming, and it just turns my stomach. We're talking with Kimberly Bird from Live Action, of course, liveaction.org, for our monthly pro-life update. Now, you were mentioning during the break, Senator Josh Hawley, who's such a great pro-life warrior, is doing another investigation on the abortion pill, correct?
He is, yes. was actually just released a day or two ago that he's going after an organization called Plan C, which directs women in states such as Florida, where I am from, Oklahoma, and Texas, to clinics that will send them the abortion pill. And this is an organization that is focused on basically shipping or mailing the abortion pill into states that want to protect life. And so he's asking the DOJ to look into this investigation. And he's done this a couple of times. I really appreciate the senator working on this, on the very dangerous chemical abortion pill, because it is, incredibly dangerous not only to the preborn child, but also to women. And it is the number one way for abortion in our country right now. 65% of all abortions are through chemical abortion. And so again, the DOJ needs to look into this, and we need to stop this very dangerous abortion pill from coming across state lines.
Well, and that's the other situation that Planned Parenthood is so upset about, is because that these pregnancy resource centers are giving women the full story about their, quote unquote, doing the air quotes, options, and letting them know about the dangers of the abortion pill, but also letting them know about the success of abortion pill reversal. So they don't want any of that. That's why they want to shut down places like
Absolutely.
Heartbeat International, right?
I think it's so important that people know about abortion pill reversal. And really, it's just a regimen of progesterone, because it's mifepristone, the first pill in the abortion pill regimen. It depletes the woman of progesterone, which is the nutrients to save the child. And so it essentially starves the preborn child in the womb. And so what pregnancy resource centers can do is they can put a woman who has taken the first abortion pill but not the second one in touch with a doctor who can give her true health care and administer progesterone treatments to save the life of the child. And that is the greatest good, I think, that pregnancy resource centers do.
I was so sad, I'm sure you were too, and all of us in the pro-life movement. We lost such a great pro-life warrior in Senator Lindsey Graham. What are your thoughts about that, Kimberly, in terms of where we go from here? Such a loss.
It was an incredible loss, and I know our CEO and founder, Lila Rose, it definitely put out a statement on, great loss for the country and for the pro-life movement. It's important that we, as a country, find leaders that are going to stand for pro-life values, for family values, marriage and family and children. And so it's important that we continue to seek out and lift up good leaders and continue to put them into office.
I saw some of the statements by a number of pro-life organizations, including Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America, and Marjorie Dannenfelser was saying that he was the one on which they could always count, the person they could always count, because when others, even if they were pro-life most of the time, would get nervous or back down on something, he was always there on the front lines with them. So just a great loss. Kimberly, thank you so much for. Go ahead, finish. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and that brings me back to us calling on Senator Josh Hawley and several other members of Congress last week. We have to have people that we can count on. We could count on him, and I'm very sorry for his family's loss. But we also, just need to continue to find these leaders that are going to stand up, and we can count on them.
Yeah, especially as we move into the midterms. We'll have to talk about that as we get closer. Kimberly, thank you so much for your great work. Give Lila our love. And again, the website for Live Action is liveaction.org. And we look forward to checking in with you, my dear, next week. Next month. Does that sound good?
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day. Kimberly Bird is with Live Action. And once a month, we come to her and ask her about different stories in the news and what's on the front lines. Minutes past the hour. Welcome back. It is a Wednesday morning and great to be with you here at EWTN's Catholic Connection, July 22nd, 2026. And if you heard our news earlier, then you know that the Holy Father, and Joan is going to talk more about this, is still in Castel Gandolfo, hopefully enjoying some rest and relaxation. And it sounds like he had a great day yesterday. He traveled from south of Rome, which is where Castel Gandolfo, the town, is located about 30 minutes south of Rome. So he's about maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours from the beautiful shrine of Monte Cassino, the Abbey of Monte Cassino. And you can find it online at Abbazia. That's spelled Abazia, montecassino.it. And when you go to the homepage, you'll see a beautiful picture, or pictures actually, of the Pope arriving there yesterday. So this monastery is absolutely incredible. It rises, from, you come through these trees in this certain area along the freeway as you're heading south and just about crossing the border from Lazio into Campania. And you see over to your left if you're heading south. Obviously, if you're going north, it's going to be on your right. You can't miss it. It just is so large. And it's absolutely incredible in terms of the structure. Now, it was rebuilt after World War II, where it really had a lot of issues in terms of suffering greatly, almost completely torn down because of the bombings during that war. So it's just beautiful the way they restored it. But the most important thing about this beautiful abbey is this is where, of course, now there's still an active life there, a monastic life there, but this is where the twins, St. Benedict of Scholastica, St. Benedict of Norcia, and St. Scholastica, his twin sister, are both buried. Now, they were born in the beautiful Umbrian town of Norcia. Norcia suffered from a great earthquake back in 2016, and believe it or not, 10 years later, it's just starting to come back to life. And if you still visit that area, for example, it's not too far from Cascia, which is obviously where St. Rita of Cascia is buried. But that whole part of Umbria that was hit by the earthquake in 2016, there are so many places that were so devastated by that earthquake that are still filled with scaffolding, and you could see a lot of rubble. And it's taken a while. There was a big dedication because of the importance, obviously, of the monastery in Norcia, and obviously the birthplace of both St. Benedict and St. Scholastica and the church there. So there was a bigger effort, I think, in that area versus some of the smaller towns that were impacted and are still struggling. But if you can do both, for example, let's say you're in Assisi, and obviously it's a year of St. Francis, and you plan on visiting Assisi, you could go southeast to Norcia, and visit the home and the birthplace of these two incredible saints. And then after you do your Rome trip, head a little bit further south. Again, it's only about less than a 2-hour trip to Monte Cassino. It's an easy day trip from Rome, and it is well worth it. Again, it is a stunning place, and the tomb is off the charts. Now, there's some great pictures on the Vatican website, and Joan Lewis will have more details on this, but there's pictures on our website at EWTNnews.com about the visit, also the Vatican website, the Vatican News website, and on the homepage of the Abbey website, again, which is Abbazia, which is Abbey in Italian, montecassino.it. Now, when reading the lovely story that was on EWTNnews.com this morning, I came across a terrific video, a report that was put together by our friend Alan Holdren, who is a former head of the EWTN News office in Rome, who's still doing some great freelance work for us at EWTN. So we're going to play this report and take a listen to the importance of this shrine, this monastery, and what's happened here over the centuries. And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about why this is a must-see on your Italy bucket list. So let's listen to this beautiful report by Alan Holdren, all about Monte Cassino.
The Battle of Monte Cassino was one of the longest and bloodiest battles of World War II, and has been described as the largest aerial bombardment ever against a single building. It took place between January and May of 1944, as Allied forces tried to break through the German defensive line known as the Gustav Line, which blocked the road to Rome. Believing the Abbey, the most strategic position along the defensive line, had become a German stronghold, Allied bombers dropped 250 tons of explosives, reducing the historic monastery to rubble. 82 years after its destruction, the rebuilt abbey continues to carry forward the legacy of St. Benedict. Time and again, the monastery has risen from the ruins, reflecting the enduring faith that inspired its founder, St. Benedict.
After each destruction, monastic life at Monte Cassino has always been reborn. This is why the abbey's motto is Succisa Viscerit. A root that has been cut returns to bloom. Today, Monte Cassino is home to a small community of 8 monks. We try to live according to the Benedictine rule, balancing work, prayer, and study. There's also an important work of preservation and safeguarding, caring for the cultural heritage we have received. There is also an important work of preservation and safeguarding, caring for the cultural heritage we have received, much of which survived the bombing, and which has continued to grow over time through the monastery's archive and library.
L'archivio che è la biblioteca del monastero.
The Abbey of Monte Cassino, by the way, and its surrounding battlefields and memorials serve as a powerful reminder of the cost of war. And it's a beautiful place. And I can understand, considering the Holy Father's emphasis recently asking to pray for world peace, why he would want to visit there. Also, obviously, because of the tombs of St. Benedict and St. Scholastica. But that's the other thing that's so special about this location. It is a great way to honor those who sacrificed so much and gave everything during World War II. So it's not only religiously significant in terms of our church history with the monasticism, and of course, St. Benedict, considered the one who was, head of all monasticism, started everything. But it is also important in terms of history for the United States and their involvement in the war, history for the world and what happened in World War II. But actually the construction of it, the reconstruction of it is just something to really see, and it's breathtaking. And if you even do like a Google search, for example, it's in my book. I have a lot of detail in Shrines and Wonders, the first volume. The pictures, it's just so phenomenal. It sits on top of a hill just above the town of Cassino, named after the mountain there, so Monte Cassino. But again, a lot of people will go by and they'll see it and they'll go, oh, isn't that pretty? And they'll keep going south on their way to Naples, Sorrento, the Amalfi Coast, and they don't bother pulling off the freeway. And I suggest doing a tour to get the full history and the importance of the monastic life, which continues there. As you heard in Alan's fine report, there's a small group of monks that still live there and pray. And if you're lucky enough, blessed enough, sometimes you can go, obviously, when they're involved in their prayer and their chanting. Such a wonderful place. It's Monte Cassino, and it is worth a visit. It goes back to the 6th century originally, by the way. And as we mentioned, it has a rich and multifaceted history spanning almost 1,500 years. So think about this. In 529, that's when it was founded. So in 2029, they will be marking 1,500 years. Now think about what we're celebrating this year, the 800th anniversary of the passing of St. Francis of Assisi. Okay? But if you think about that, this abbey was founded much earlier in 529. Monte Cassino, worth a visit. We'll be right back. Wednesday. And speaking of Monte Cassino and all things Rome and the Pope, we have Joan Lewis with us this morning, as we always do on Wednesdays. So you and I, girlfriend, were talking during the break and back and forth via emails about just how amazing Monte Cassino is. And the pictures from the Pope's visit were phenomenal. Good morning.
Well, good afternoon from another warm day in Rome. It must be from here to I don't know where it's warm. But anyway, we're establishing all kinds of new records, etc. I hope it's nicer where you are. But back to Monte Cassino. You gave a great description of it just a few minutes ago, and how old it is. Of course, it was nearly completely destroyed in the Second World War, February 1944, because the Allies thought that the Germans were housed there and did some bombing. And however, in post-war reconstruction, the Abbey was rebuilt. But what the Pope did mainly, and here's another reason to go there, St. Benedict is buried there. So if you want to pray at the tomb of this amazing saint, whose twin sister, by the way, is named Scholastica. Anyway, the Pope paused at the tomb, and he pleaded really with Benedict to plead for peace. And that's, as I said in a note to you before we went on air, I mean, peace was the first word out of the Pope's mouth when minutes after his election. he appears on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, and the first words out of his mouth are, "Peace be with you." And I mean, I don't know how many times he's pleaded for peace, but we can find it in a new book that just came out yesterday, written by him, or actually edited by Alessandro Banfi. It's Disarmed and Disarming Peace as a Gift. And it contains all the addresses and reflections on peace since his election. So that was obviously one of his main stops, one of his main reflections when he stopped at the Abbey. And then, to their great delight, the Pope had lunch with the religious community and then afterwards returned to Castel Gandolfo. But interestingly enough, it was exactly 10 days ago, July 10th. So 12 days ago, the 2026 Pacis Nuncius Award was given to Cardinal Pizzaballa, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, in the monastery. And he was very, very moved by that visit. I believe he had never been there before. And as he was looking around and learning of the history that it was razed to the ground during the war, the Cardinal recalled the devastation of Gaza. And he said, it's 80% destroyed. And then, of course, he too launched an appeal for peace. And he said, change must start from below with social, cultural work, and nonviolent language. So, yes, a remarkable day. And it's good that the Holy Father, in the midst of his mini vacation at Castel Gandolfo, could take the time to go to, to Monte Cassino. So I don't know if it was cooler or hotter, but anyway, I'm sure there's some fans on or air conditioning in the Abbey. And you're right, though, Teresa. If people can add it to their visit, if travel agents can put this on, just even as a one-day stop, out of Rome, it would be worth it. So, and we too can pray for peace if we go visit.
And the views from there, when you walk in, you go up and there's that huge loggia that overlooks the valley there. Those views are just incredible.
And that is one of the pictures that the Vatican News put online when they covered his visit. So he only has a few more days, till next Monday at Pope Leo in Castel Gandolfo, and I'm sure it's going to be sorely missed, but I'm guessing he will resume his, overnight, one night a week trips to Castel Gandolfo from Rome, no matter what the weather is. So hopefully we'll learn about that next Monday when he leaves to return to Rome, to the Apostolic Palace in Rome. And by the way, it's been fun watching the reaction of the townspeople, because you and I know that Castel Gandolfo, there was a papal absence of 12 years because Francis did not go there. And he did turn the Apostolic Palace where the Pope is into a museum, but they've been working to return it much more. I'm not exactly sure of the work, and the Vatican hasn't published anything, but there has been work done on the Apostolic Palace to return it to much more of a residence. And today, if I don't have any more technical problems with my laptop, I'm going to post some pictures I took of the palace a number of years ago when I was with a group of women from the Vatican. We visited what was then a complete museum, and I took a whole bunch of pictures of the rooms, the reception rooms, oh my word, the papal bedroom, the papal study, the papal chapel, and everything else. So I'll be putting those online today, because most of the articles about the Pope returning to the palace have shown just him, once or twice on the balcony, and then his Angelus addresses have been every Sunday from the main entrance overlooking right on Piazza della Libertà. So, but it's the townspeople are so thrilled. They turn out in such great numbers. It's just fantastic. You couldn't get a fly in Liberty Square on Sundays around the Angelus time. So, and then more than anything else, they were thrilled when he when he's like last summer, newly elected, he decides that he will make Castel Gandolfo part of his life, but he had been staying every weekday, as we know from reporting on it. He'd been staying in the adjacent property to the acres that are in the town of Castel Gandolfo. It's known as Villa Barberini. And so I think at that time, I do remember reading a report that the then head of the Augustinian Fathers had mentioned that the Pope Leo really wanted to be in where he is now, in the Apostolic Palace. Not that Villa Barberini isn't exceptional and beautiful, and the gardens, and you and I have seen those, but the Pope really did want to be in the Apostolic Palace, and now he is. And I'm guessing he's going to come back. We'll know that soon enough, but he'll probably come back for the August 15th Feast of the Assumption. He did come back last year, and that's been pretty much a tradition of popes to have Mass at the church there just on Liberty Square, and and I'm pretty sure he's going to take that opportunity and come back and enjoy the townspeople and that beautiful palace. In fact, the concert last Saturday, offered in the courtyard of the palace. Mm-hmm. It was a sign of it was offered by the Diocese of Albano, a sign of closeness and affection for the Pope during his summer stay. So, there would probably be 3 concerts a week if people had their chance just to say, Holy Father, thank you. So,
Let me ask you also, we have about 5 minutes left, and I know there's another interesting story you and I were chatting about back and forth from a journalistic perspective. Some issues with the documentary about the Pope that was produced by the Dicastery for Communications, and there were some issues with it, and a pretty strong editorial piece by Italian News regarding some of the problems with it. But it's back up on the Vatican News website right now, right?
Well, actually, on July 1st, the documentary came out about, it's called Leone a Roma, Leone in Rome. Right. And I saw it in America, as a matter of fact, because I was in America shortly after it came out in Italy, and I saw it with English subtitles. Anyway, all of a sudden, I came back to Rome 4 or 5 days ago, and I wanted to look at it again. And on the page where there was a long explanation of the movie, it was all black. Excuse me again. It was all black where there should have been a photograph, and there was a sentence that said that it had been the video was unavailable because the video contains content claimed by RAI. Now, RAI, R-A-I, is a state-owned television, but RAI came out yesterday saying, regarding the alleged blocking of the documentary distributed by Vatican News on YouTube, on the Vatican News YouTube channel, by the way, RAI said it did not initiate any block on the content. The fact it was unavailable for several hours, but that should have been corrected to several days, was caused by the platform's automated systems triggered by a match between certain images in the documentary and material already present on RAI's YouTube channel. So YouTube took nothing down. In the first place, it was, as I said, Vatican YouTube channel. RAI took nothing down. It was an automatic system, and anybody who knows technology. But why did this page remain blank? You couldn't click on it and see the video for 3 days. And why did no one, there had to be technicians, this was not in charge of RAI. It would have been in the hands of Vatican technicians. So it took 3 days for people to realize that this was indeed a triggered. It's just like you put some additional stress on your electrical thing at home, and all your lights go out. Okay, well then you adjust that. You know what you have to do, and that was basically the same thing. So. It went back up yesterday, but there was absolutely no word from the Vatican. So, and in fact, the original post for this one, the Vatican just simply said, here's the film, here's who made it available, who edited it, et cetera, et cetera. But their original July 1st post was very much longer and a much longer explanation. So, we're back to normal, but we don't know why this huge glitch in the Vatican news story. And then there was one actually very well followed, commonly read blog / news information site that quite a bit took the Vatican to task for not realizing why the content was down for 3 days. So, I mean, it's back up now, but it is kind of a mini mystery because I guess there's just certain websites in life that you expect to never have that kind of a glitch unless something is hacked or whatever.
So was there a copyright issue or not? Because the article you sent me, the one you just mentioned, the blog that was pretty critical of the Vatican, claims that it was a copyright issue.
Well, the Rai said, by the way, he said the Rai in the communique of yesterday said, it is noted that the materials for the documentary had been properly requested by Vatican media from Rai and formally released by the relevant Rai department. So if somewhere in there a bigger question still remains between what happened at the Vatican website for 3 days, between Rai's explanation of what happened to the site going black and this other website criticizing Vatican media for not being on the ball.
Sorry, Joan, I asked this question too late. We have about 15 seconds left, but it's an interesting story. I know you addressed it also on your beautiful blog at jonesrome@wordpress.com, so we'll check that out, and we look forward to talking to you next week, and we'll be right back. Thanks so much for tuning into hour number 1 of EWTN's Catholic Connection on a Wednesday morning. It is July 22nd, 2026. Can you believe, friends, that we are almost through the month of July? I can't. Just flies by. Well, this hour flew by as well. And next hour, we are going to be having a very, very important chat with Lewis Brown from Christ Medicus to talk about the report from the Religious Freedom Committee of the administration, the current administration. There were many wonderful Catholics on the committee, including His Excellency Bishop Barron. And so we'll get the impression of this report from Lewis Brown and what else we can do, of course, to protect our religious freedoms here in the United States of America. We can never, ever take our freedoms for granted because we know freedom isn't free. And then before that, though, we'll have, of course, your news and your weather. And then we're also going to be taking a look at, as I mentioned, the new ban in France on social media, and also a young man who is causing some real concerns for parents and others concerned about the issue of social media, especially when it comes to social media influences. So that's what's coming up in hour number 2 of Catholic Connection on a Wednesday. I appreciate you sticking with us, and always great to be with you. And again, we are back stateside here in Michigan, and really appreciating the cooler weather we're having right now. Cool for summertime. It's only going to be a high of like 77 today in Metro Detroit, but it's such a relief. As much as I love summer, it was way too hot in the motherland. Barely could go outside, as Joan said. And we'll talk to you in a few minutes on the other side on EWTN Radio Extra.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And we continue our Wednesday broadcast here on EWTN's Radio Extra. Thank you so much for tuning in to EWTN's Catholic Connection. Coming up in the second hour, hour number 2 it is, on a Wednesday, we are going to be taking a look at this new social media ban that is going on in France, another country jumping on this bandwagon, pun intended, I suppose, regarding social media, and to make sure that young people have limited access to it. It's just Such a scary time. Now, speaking of that, I was, getting updated on all the news once we landed back in the United States. What's today? Wednesday, Monday, and before we had our major technical issues yesterday, just trying to keep up on everything. And I came across a story of this young man who was a multifaceted story. He's a multimillionaire. He's only like 20 or 21 years old, and he has harnessed social media from an earnings standpoint. Okay, so that's one part of the story. But the other part is that he is very familiar, or actually kind of gave a name to this new thing going on, this new trend called Looksmaxxing. In other words, being so consumed with the way you appear online, your pictures, all your imaging, all your messaging. And basically he's being called parents' worst nightmare. And there's some real issues raised because he's done some extreme things to himself in terms of his own appearance. He's a good-looking young man. I don't know why he felt he needed all of that, but it just brings up this whole question of what's going on, because what's really important to look at is that for decades, and I have a lot of this in my books on media, including Extreme Makeover. I have a whole chapter on this, on advertising and women and media and women and how it impacts us and our body image. But now men are really facing the same thing just as bad, if not worse, than what women have faced for practically ever since the dawn of media, basically. So we'll talk about that in 2 cents. And then looking forward to chatting with Lewis Brown, who is the executive director of the Christ Medicus Foundation. He's taking a deep dive into the draft report by the U.S. Religious Liberty Commission. So we'll have 2 segments with Lewis, and he does such a great job. And he always keeps us updated on what's happening with the religious freedom issues. All right, weather-wise, the National Weather Service is still calling for those severe thunderstorms this evening in the mid-Atlantic. And then we have Tropical Storm Bertha that we're watching very closely for you in the Gulf. So we have scattered thunderstorms, more specifically with severe gusts and hail and a tornado that are possible, or a cold front from the Ohio Valley to the mid-Atlantic this evening. Tropical Storm Bertha is expected to bring tropical storm conditions to portions of the Gulf Coast from the panhandle of Florida into Louisiana through today. That is a look at the forecast and a look at your rundown for a Wednesday morning. Right now at 3 minutes past the hour, let's get started with the news for you on a Wednesday, July 22nd. Well, designed by God, guided by love, open to life is the theme of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops 2026 Natural Family Planning Awareness Week. As EWTN News explains, the Bishop's annual campaign, which began on the 19th on Monday and runs through the 25th, highlights God's design for married love, the gift of life, and the Church's teaching on NFP methods. Now, to educate people on the matter, the NFP program of the USCCB develops a poster each year with supportive materials to be displayed in a number of different areas. These areas include parishes, hospitals, NFP classrooms, marriage preparation sites, doctor's offices, family life centers, and campus ministry centers. Back in 1981, the Catholic Church in the U.S., as the article explains today, worked strongly to strengthen efforts to make NFP and church teaching more widely known and used. And to further that mission, the Bishops' Conference established the NFP program. Nathan Morley with Vatican News is telling us that death toll from Venezuela's devastating twin earthquakes last month, now numbering thousands, but officials are saying it still could rise even further.
There were 1,400 aftershocks following the 2 main earth movers which shook a nation and an entire continent. National Assembly President Jorge Rodriguez says the official death toll is now 5,208, while more than 16,000 people have been injured. This will rise, but the full extent of the loss of life won't ever be totally calculated. The coastal state of Huara is worst affected. Large areas will take years to build back. International aid agencies who are providing emergency funding are warning of disease, especially due to chronic lack of fresh water. It's a gargantuan challenge for interim President Delcy Rodriguez and her administration. Washington's pledged $150 million worth of help, but is still holding the whip hand on an array of economic sanctions plus strictures over a nation grievously suffering. National catastrophes do and can happen to any nation at any time, yet the poorest and the least equipped to help their citizens so need humanitarian help. This is a time for olive branches rather than big sticks. For Vatican Radio, James Bliss reporting.
Pope Leo making a private visit yesterday to the Abbey of Monte Cassino, where St. Benedict of Norcia is buried. The Holy Father making that trip while on vacation, of course, south of Rome at Castel Gandolfo, and he will be in Castel Gandolfo on vacation through this weekend, or actually through Monday. At Monte Cassino yesterday, he prayed at the tomb of St. Benedict, considered the father of Western monasticism, entrusting him with his plea for peace in those regions of the world marked by bloodshed and conflict. The Pope also enjoying a nice pranzo or lunch with the Benedictine community at the Abbey. Leo's surprise visit to Monte Cassino was his first since his election to the papacy last year. By the way, the Abbey of Monte Cassino, founded by St. Benedict, get this, in 529, celebrating the 1500th anniversary of its founding in 2 years, in 2029. In other news this morning, President Trump says Iran desperately wants to meet. He made the comment while speaking in the Oval Office yesterday.
One of the first things we did early in the administration, they would have a nuclear weapon, and you wouldn't have Israel. And in my opinion, you wouldn't have various other countries in the Middle East. They'd all be gone.
This comes as the U.S. has conducted strikes on Iran for 10 straight nights. 3 U.S. soldiers were killed in Iranian attacks on bases in Jordan and Iraq over the weekend. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps also claiming its aerospace force used cruise missiles to destroy America's central data infrastructure in Bahrain in an attack that also targeted U.S. air defense systems. And Secretary of War Pete Hegseth testifying this week about Iran war funding in the Senate. With the war escalating, Hegseth told the Senate Appropriations Committee the White House's $88 billion supplemental funding request is critical to ensure America's military readiness across the board.
President Trump's following a simple logic. The military requires a generational investment to deliver on peace through strength.
Hegseth is being joined by Joint Chiefs Chair General Dan Kane, and Hegseth's appearance comes following the, as we mentioned, confirmed recent deaths of 2 U.S. soldiers from Iranian strikes in Jordan and another service member's death in Iraq during a controlled explosion to destroy an Iranian drone. Several anti-war protesters, meanwhile, interrupting the beginning of the hearing yesterday. And President Trump has directed his administration to allow U.S. air carriers to fly directly to Lebanon. Trump making the announcement in a post on Truth Social. It comes after Trump met with Lebanese President Joseph Aoun at the White House yesterday. Trump said the Lebanese leader has done a remarkable job and he's working to transform his country and is excited for Americans to visit Lebanon. Monica Nelson tells us, meanwhile, the State Department is warning Americans, speaking of travel, to stay alert as tensions between the U.S. and Iran continue to rise.
Officials say the security situation remains unpredictable and could escalate without warning. The department notes that U.S. diplomatic facilities have been targeted, including some outside of the Middle East. Americans traveling or living in the region are urged to use extra caution and prepare for possible travel disruptions. The State Department has issued a worldwide travel caution until further notice. I'm Monica Nelson.
Republicans are trying to codify President Trump's border security priorities. The push is led by Texas Congressman Chip Roy.
What's it going to take before we work together to make sure the border remains secure, no matter the occupant at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue?
He says if there is a future president who's a Democrat, they could easily roll back when what the president has done for national security legislation, expanding Homeland Security's authority over the asylum process. It also establishes new penalties for those who overstay their visas by more than 10 days. And Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega teasing plans to do away with elections in his country. He's serving his 4th straight term since taking power back in 2007, and he floated the idea of ending elections by next year during a government rally to mark the 47th anniversary of the Sandinista Revolution takeover of the country. While Ortega asserted there won't be any more elections, he did not provide details on how voting would be formally scrapped. The U.S. is one of many countries that have accused Nicaragua's leader of being a dictator, while the UN Human Rights Council has accused the government of systematic abuses and authoritarian rule. Michael Kastner reports the Department of Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. is saying the cyclosporiasis outbreak is now under control.
His announcement comes as thousands of people in the U.S. have gotten sick from the parasite, with most experiencing severe diarrhea. The Food and Drug Administration had linked the outbreak to shredded iceberg lettuce from a Taylor Farms facility in Mexico. Mexican health authorities, however, said their own investigation didn't find evidence that the outbreak originated there. The majority of the cases have been reported in Michigan, where more than 6,500 cases have been reported. I'm Michael Kastner.
And the federal government withholding almost $1 billion in Medicaid for the state of California. This over fraud concerns. Here again is Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He made this announcement as well yesterday.
We have a duty to stop the payments, demand answers, and then follow the evidence wherever it leads.
The Trump administration says California has seen a huge spike in billing for in-home services, up 24% compared to a 12% jump across the rest of the country. The governor, Gavin Newsom, posting on social media, the spike isn't about fraud. It's about keeping seniors and people with disabilities out of nursing homes. And he says the fraud claims are a political stunt. Well, weather is still making headlines. Severe weather slamming several parts of the country this week. Reporter Aaron McLaughlin tells us possible tornadoes even formed in the New York City area yesterday.
The storm rolling through Manhattan with multiple tornado warnings west of the Big Apple and at least 2 reports of twisters in Morris County, New Jersey.
And tornado and flood watches issued for more than 30 million people, stretching from the New York City area through Philadelphia and down into parts of the Mid-Atlantic. Powerful storms inflicting flooding, rain, and damage across multiple metro areas. Meanwhile, as we mentioned in our weather forecast, Tropical Storm Bertha is churning through the Gulf, creating dangerous surf, rip currents, and heavy rain as it appears to be headed for Louisiana and out west. Monsoon rains have triggered flash flooding in Arizona, while mud and debris force the closure of part of Interstate 70 in western California. And France is banning social media use for youth under the age of 15. Lawmakers overwhelmingly voting in favor of that measure, which will now go to President Emmanuel Macron to sign into law. France, now the first country in the European Union to introduce an age restriction, but it's not yet clear how the social media sites will verify users' ages. Meanwhile, Australia making history late last year when it implemented the first ban on social media for youth, while countries including Spain, Greece, and Denmark are also planning to impose minimum age limits for the platforms as well. More on this coming up next on a Wednesday morning. Minutes past the hour. Is a Wednesday morning. Thanks for tuning in to hour number 2 of EWTN's Catholic Connection on a Wednesday, July 22nd. Great to be with you today and every day, Monday through Friday. All right, so there's a lot going on with social media influencers, social media bans around the world. More and more countries are making a statement by trying to ban and attempting to ban and actually do ban social media for young people under 15. The latest is the country of France, and we had that in the news. I'll go back to that in a minute. But I thought this was interesting, that this story about France banning social media for young people 15 and under was happening and made the headlines. At the same time, we're seeing more on this influencer known as Clavicular. And he is the one who really started this whole idea of Looksmaxxing. All right, so what is Looksmaxxing? Have you heard about this? There's this new thing out there where you put a word in front of the word maxing, and it means that you're trying to kind of binge on something, to, learn more about something or embrace yourself in something. There's even something recently called Nona maxing, which I talked about on the air, where people have fallen in love with the Italian lifestyle and the whole idea of spending more time with family and your Nona or grandmother and cooking, farm to table. That's not a bad thing. People are looking to embrace that kind of a lifestyle. And the Italians have taken that, pun intended, to the max, so to speak. But this Looksmaxxing is pretty scary, especially if you're a parent concerned about social media influence. It's a trend which is totally focused not only on your physical appearance, but ways to enhance your physical attractiveness. And the problem when it comes to this guy known as clavicular is that it can often involve, as it did with him, various practices aimed at achieving this idea of the perfect appearance, okay, which is often influenced, as we know, by media in general, but especially social media and online communities. And it can even include extreme measures such as breaking your bones, which he did, not to mention other types of drastic efforts to make yourself look so-called, perfect out there, which is just crazy because there's so much pressure already on all of us, especially women. But now men are facing, and they're blaming this guy for it, basically, the fact that they are being pressured now to change their appearance and look a particular way online and in person. So who is clavicular and what to know about the controversial Looksmaxxing influencer? His real name is Brandon Peters. And again, he is known for promoting the practice of Looksmaxxing. He frequently posts photos and videos of the extreme methods that he's used to achieve what he thinks is a perfect physical appearance. Meanwhile, he was hospitalized earlier this year for a suspected overdose, and this happened on April 14th. Now, this young man, Braden Peters, I think he's 20 years old, and he was born and raised in New Jersey to a stay-at-home mom and a businessman dad. However, by the time he was 14, this is an article from People, by the way, he was testing out various controlled substances and steroids to ascend his physical appearance. He also gained a huge following on TikTok and Instagram for posting content encouraging young men to physically alter their appearance to attract women. And over the last year, get this, he has gained over 1 million followers through different platforms. In addition to garnering a social media following, he also launched an online academy, Clavicular's Clan, a private community offering detailed guides that will guarantee to ascend you. He's risen in popularity, but he's also been arrested twice and been involved in violent interactions on his live streams. As we mentioned earlier, in April of 2026, he was hospitalized following a suspected overdose. After his live stream suddenly came to a stop, people confirmed at the time he appeared to be under the influence as he had slurred speech. Okay, so there's some problems here, obviously. And he has not been officially diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. He frequently refers to himself as autistic and claims he has autism. He also says he struggled in high school, so he started researching how to change his body. So this young man has not only hundreds of thousands of followers, but as I just read, over 1 million followers. And if you could imagine a young person, especially a young man who's trying to fit in and maybe, having problems in terms of connecting with people at school, thinking that if I could only look a particular way, as so many young women have done for decades, then I'll be accepted, I'll be appreciated, and maybe I'll become popular. But this is just a reminder as to why we have to be careful as to whom and what children are doing online, whom they're following and what they're doing online. Now, by high school graduation, Peter's appearance had already drastically changed, and he started looking at the online forum looksmax.org and frequently posted on it. At the same time, he enrolled at Sacred Heart University, but claimed to the New York Times he was expelled after someone in the Looksmaxxing forum told the university that he had drugs in his dorm. So anyway, there is all kinds of controversy with this young man. And now there's a whole thing about the kind of content that he's putting out there as well. Again, he goes by the name Clavicular across his platform, specializing in Looksmaxxing. And he explained to the New York Times that his community consider actor Matt Bomer to be the level of harmony and perfection they're trying to achieve. The actor has no links, though, to the Looksmaxxing community for Peters. Okay, so this is one of the latest things going on out there. There are these young people who are putting themselves out there as the be-all and end-all in terms of the ways to achieve the perfect look, the perfect body, your physical attractiveness, not only in person, but online. And this is one of the reasons why so many nations are looking at or have already moved to ban social media for young people. The latest, as we mentioned in the news, is France. The parliament, as we reported in the news earlier, approving a law to ban social media for those under 15, beginning in January of next year, making it the first European country to block young people from the platforms. The law will mean everyone in France must verify their age to access social media, and comes as the UK and EU are developing their own limits in response to concern for children's health. While skeptics have questioned the law's viability, the government has insisted the online tools to put the age checks in place are effective and safe. Okay, so it will be implemented in 2 stages. From September, people under 15 will not be able to open accounts, and age verification will be required on all new accounts. And in January, the rule will apply to all existing accounts, meaning everyone in France will have to prove they are over 15 to use social media. And once the ban is in place, social media platforms will need to use age verification tools approved by the French privacy regulator, according to Reuters news agency. So the same week that France is moving forward with a ban on social media, we're hearing about more and more about this young man who identifies as clavicular and the problems that are occurring with these influencers online to pressure young people to somehow be this perfect image. But according to whom? This is the problem. This is why it's so crucial for all of us, and even adults can certainly be influenced by what we see online. There's plenty of proof and evidence of that. Do we see ourselves as children of God, loved by him? Or are we too obsessing about something? Not that we can't present ourselves well and to look nice and to be well groomed. That's fine. Taking care of ourselves. Our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit. But we have to have an understanding of who we are, made in the image and likeness of God. We'll be right back. Thanks for tuning in to the second hour of Catholic Connection. Great to be with you, and great to be joined by my friend Lewis Brown, who's originally from Michigan, by the way. He's director of the Christ Medicus Foundation, taking a look at the draft report by the U.S. Religious Liberty Commission. Lewis, great to have you on the program again. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Teresa. Always.
All right, so what do you think? I mean, I read it over, and I thought there were some really great statements, and especially about how the persecution, so much persecution occurred, especially under the previous administration.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, and agreed. I thought that the draft report was outstanding. We submitted a public comment on the U.S. Religious Liberties report that really exposes the depth to which, the Biden administration, state governments, and then cultural actors have been attempting to push out religion out of American society and really deny religious liberty in a way that would radically change our country. So I think it's important that the Religious Liberty Commission established itself under the Trump administration, that they had these hearings, that they've issued this draft report, and that they've made important recommendations about how the government can act to return religious liberty to its central place in American law, in American public policy, and in American society.
Now, you're always on top of things religious liberty-wise and issues that are facing us in the church, with the government. Were you surprised by some of the stories that came forward during some of the testimony? That was brought out when they released the summary, but I was reading the report, and it's shocking, but it isn't, considering what went on. But some of these stories were incredible, not in a good way.
Yeah, no, I have not been shocked by what's been coming out through the Religious Liberty Commission's, findings and hearings. I think my experience, particularly in healthcare, has been that there is a ongoing severe attack on religious exercise in healthcare and beyond. And it's been going on in the country. This attack on religious liberty, this hostility to religious exercise has been going on in some ways for decades, but it has intensified really over the last 10 or 15 years. And particularly as we reflect on 250 years of America and think about the next 250 years, who we are as a country, who we are as a people, with God-given human dignity at the center, is very important and is vital to the future of the United States. If we lose religious exercise, if we lose the free exercise of religion and religious liberty, the country that we know of equal justice for all, equal dignity for all, human and civil rights for all, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that is totally lost without religious exercise. And the poor and the vulnerable in our country lose because it's religious institutions, religious people, churches. We have, since the beginning, cared for the poor, the vulnerable, the sick, and the suffering, and that gets thrown out without the exercise of religion by people of faith. And so that's very clear by this report, and I'm not shocked. I think we need to continue to be sober about the challenges for people of faith that have strong moral religious convictions in our country, whether it's in healthcare or education or the private sector. It's rampant, and it's important that we reclaim the central place of religious freedom in America.
Yeah, there's a summary that you can look at online if you just go to the Justice Department website, justice.gov/Religious Liberty Commission. I just want to refresh our listeners' memories. We did a lot on this when it first came out. It says the commission heard from mothers who were lied to by their children's school administrators, children who were bullied because of their religious beliefs, healthcare workers who have risked losing their jobs due to religious objections to certain procedures. That's most likely referring to COVID and the vaccine. A grandson of Holocaust survivors restricted from public spaces because of his Jewish faith, nuns who were targeted by New York State, and workers, including military service members, who lost pensions and life savings when forced to choose between their faith and vaccine mandates, among so many others. And let me remind people that this didn't happen in some foreign land, some third world country. This happened repeatedly in the United States of America. Right, Louis?
That's totally right. When we think about our Catholic medical students that are going to medical schools in the United States across the country, many of them have questioned or continuing to question while they're in medical school, can I be Catholic and can I be a doctor? To a certain extent, I think there's a reality for law students in the country that are Catholic and wondering how can they persevere in exercising their faith and work as lawyers. Here in Colorado, Teresa, where I live, my amazing wife, Krista, who's a Catholic mental health therapist, after the Supreme Court struck down a Colorado law that would have violated the First Amendment rights of Colorado therapists. And then after that, some weeks later, the Colorado State Legislature passes another law that allows Colorado mental health therapists who have Christian, biologically based views on human sexuality to be sued in civil court if they don't go along with Colorado's viewpoint on sexuality. So we have states, we have almost half the country that in healthcare, in education, in the private sector, if you don't go along with their social Marxism, if you don't go along with their radical dedication to abortion and gender ideology and views on marriage, you are being pushed out of civil society. You're being pushed out of your job, out of your field, out of your vocation. We know religious liberty is the freedom to love, And without the freedom to love, who are we as Americans? So this is very real. This is real for mental health therapists. This is real for Catholic school teachers. This is real for Catholic medical professionals. To an extent, it's real for people that are in public policy. It's very real for folks that are in business and that feel very restricted in what they can do if they want to climb the corporate ladder, if they have biblically based Catholic views around the human person. And it's a shame. But my hope and my prayer and our work is to restore religious liberty to its rightful place. And I think this commission and its draft report and findings is helping to do that.
Yeah. When we come back after the break, and we have about, I think, a minute left, I want to dive into the misuse and misunderstanding of the phrase separation of church and state. It's so frustrating to me that so many reporters, when they write, don't even bother to check. And as people of media, they should know what the First Amendment says. There is nothing in the Constitution or the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights that talks about separation of church and state. Yet, as came out during the press release when they released the original, the first draft, they said that was one of the biggest issues in terms of these abuses and the way people were discriminated against had to do with a misapplication and a misunderstanding of the First Amendment and what's in the First Amendment and what isn't in the First Amendment. So when we come back, I'd like to talk about that because that just drives me crazy, especially as someone with a journalism degree. We're talking with Lewis Brown, the executive director of the Christ Medicus Foundation. We're taking a look at the draft report by the U.S. Religious Liberty Commission. We'll continue our conversation on a Wednesday when we return. Again, you should check out the great work of the wonderful Christ Medicus Foundation. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Catholic Connection on Wednesday. Wrapping up the second hour of the show with our friend Lewis Brown, the executive director of the Christ Medicus Foundation, talking about the draft report by the U.S. Religious Liberty Commission. Lewis, before we talk about the First Amendment and lack of understanding out there, especially in the media and in other areas, it was great to see so many Catholics, prominent and important Catholics, including His Excellency Bishop Robert Barron, who I think is so eloquent and such an amazing defender of religious freedom, and somebody who does such a great job of explaining it to people, right?
Right. No, right. I think Bishop Barron is doing really important work on teaching people about Catholic social thought and its place in American politics. I think my friend Ryan Anderson, I've known him for years. He's also on the commission. He leads the Ethics and Public Policy Center. He's doing phenomenal work. He's a remarkable leader. And so it's been a blessing to see this ecumenical group of leaders do really good work. And it's not about privileging one faith over the other, but it's about exercising our moral, God-given human freedom to love God and love neighbor consistent with our well-formed moral and religious convictions. That is the heart of who we are as a country, and that's the work that the commission's doing. Ryan Anderson, Bishop Barron, also our friend Maggie Bush, who's the executive director of commission, they've been doing outstanding work, and it's important for our political community, for our politics today, but it's also important for the historical record for generations to come. So I think it's vital, it's important, and it's an urgent issue that's affecting us today.
Dan Patrick, the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, was a big part of that commission, and he actually led the press conference along with the president and the other leaders on the commission, talking about how the First Amendment that was misused and misunderstood, and somehow the media and those in government were claiming that many of the cases where they tried to either discriminate or were successful, claimed that these people were violating the separation of church and state, insisting that it was in the First Amendment or in the Constitution of the United States. When are people going to finally get a clue and actually look up what's in the First Amendment, Lewis? It drives me crazy.
Right. The U.S. Constitution protects the free exercise of religion, such that the intent of the First Amendment is to protect religion, people of faith, churches, religious organizations, from undue burdens from the federal government. Right. The free exercise clause of the First Amendment, protecting religious liberty, was intended to protect religion from an oppressive government, number one. Number two, the First Amendment was also intended to prohibit the establishment of religion in America, which are completely coexistent and complementary of each other. There is no such thing as a separation between church and state. That language from Thomas Jefferson in his private correspondence, it's nowhere in the U.S. Constitution. If you look at the founders, if you look at the Declaration of Independence, if you look at the Federalist Papers,
Bill of Rights, right?
If you looked at the Bill of Rights, it was all about protecting the free exercise of religion. And it's not just worship. I really enjoyed the documentary that PBS did by Ken Burns on the American Revolution. It was imperfect. It was largely very good, but unfortunately, I think it was the final episode. They talked about the Bill of Rights, and they said the freedom of worship. And it's not what the Constitution says. It says the freedom of religion, which with all of its implications. The founders knew that freedom of religion was absolutely vital, not just on Sunday, but Monday through Saturday, that in our homes, in our civic life, and in our politics, Americans are free to exercise the religion. That's how we love God. That's how we love neighbor. That's what the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution protects. Religious freedom protects the freedom to love. It's enshrined in the Constitution. Separation of church and state, that language and the concept and the way that secularists, apply it is completely inconsistent with any accurate reading of the U.S. Constitution or the American founding.
So how did it get so out of control where they're always throwing that phrase around and trying to scare people by saying it's in the Constitution?
Yeah, I think that, that we could talk about that for 30 minutes or, and really for hours. But there has been a current, it's largely been, it's been at times limited and sometimes it's been large, but there's been a current today and in decades past of political and cultural forces that have a deep hostility for God and a deep hostility for religion, out of a prideful sense that we should replace God with man, or that we should replace God with the state. And so there are those throughout American history that have sought to exalt the state, to exalt the government over God, or to exalt human man over God, and it's pride. And today that form is that unfortunate hostile current towards religious freedom is manifesting itself in the rise of socialism, right? We've seen the new mayor of New York City, where I live in the Denver metro area. We just had a Democratic socialist defeat a longtime left-wing Democratic member of Congress. We're seeing that in other places. The rise of democratic socialism in our country, the rise of socialism in our country, which destroys human dignity, destroys the free exercise of religion. Every time you see socialism as a wave come into a country, they go after the church, they go after religious exercise, they go after education, and they go after healthcare. It's an old playbook, and it's happening now. And so in states like Colorado, Teresa, and other places across the country, people of faith in choosing schools for their children, in choosing where to live, and in choosing their professions are beginning to legally and culturally feel that they can't be Catholic, they can't be a Christian, they can't seriously exercise their faith and choose the right school for the kids and live out their vocation and their profession and live in a community and have their beliefs respected. That's really serious. It's really serious. And we need to be vigilant, and we need to peaceably be on guard to protect religious liberty, not just in law, but in the culture. That's absolutely vital right now. It's great we've had these U.S. Supreme Court wins on many things from religious freedom to free speech to parental rights, but in states like Colorado and many other states across the country, if it wasn't for the existing U.S. Supreme Court we have, there would be no legal force to vindicate religious liberty and other constitutionally protected basic civil rights. That's a scary place for us to be in our country. We need to pray, we need to fast, and we need to act politically, legally, and culturally.
Talking with Lewis Brown, of course, the executive director of Christ Medicus Foundation, about the U.S. Religious Liberty Commission recently releasing its full report. And you mentioned the Democratic Socialists. It's very frightening. What scares me the most is that so many people are not aware of these cases. And some people are very swayed by what these politicians say and how they make everything sound so wonderful and it's going to be great. And it really is scary that these people, they basically want to remake this country, if you look at their platform.
Yeah, they want a different country. I mean, it's the same thing. We talked about this, during COVID. It was really obvious. These folks literally want a different country. They don't really believe in the U.S. Constitution. They don't really believe in the American founding. And there's no love there. There's good, we should give people the benefit of the doubt in terms of having good intentions, but good intentions isn't enough. What's the actual effect of what you're doing? Socialism drives God and drives out human charity and community from every society that it comes into. It depersonalizes, it dehumanizes the poor, the weak, the vulnerable. And so what we see is that as socialism rises, people that are considered unproductive, unfit, inconvenient, not useful, they get discarded. And it leads to a culture of death every time. And that's what we're fighting against. And so we need to have better arguments and better ideas. We need to battle it out politically, peaceably. We need to fight at the ballot box and in courtrooms legally. But we also need to serve. I think, I talk about this a lot, Teresa. If you look at the Russian Revolution, if you look at what happened in Russia, a lot of the problem was that, peasants, people that experienced serfdom in Russia during that time in history, they had legitimate concerns and, grievances about injustice, real injustice. Those needs were never met. And so two things are happening here. On the one hand, you have the rise, as even, I think our clergy has talked about, you have the rise of immoral, dehumanizing ideologies across the country and across the world. And so that is happening. But you also have the legitimate concerns of people that are suffering, that are experiencing unemployment, or that are struggling to keep up with the economy, or that have a legitimate desire for healthcare, or a legitimate desire to feed their family and to improve their standing in life. And so we, as Catholics, we're Catholic. And so we have to present the teaching of human dignity and God-given freedom, and work to do that, and work to make that concrete reality in American life and law and public policy and culture. But we also have to serve. We have to use the gifts that God has given us, the abundance that God has given us, and share that with our brothers and sisters that are suffering, particularly materially, in all of these different ways. And so both are true. We have to call out the lies and the deceptions. We have to present the truth of the beauty of God-given dignity upon which our Constitution is founded, upon which our country is founded. And then we have to serve in Detroit, in Chicago, in New York City, in the Appalachians, across the country. And that's the work that we have to do. It's both. It's a both and it's hard. But we can't just, call these people out and just, sit in our homes and go to cocktail parties and not serve. And that's the beauty too. Last thing I'll say, the beauty of the pro-life movement, the beauty of what Catholic Charities is doing, and across the country, the beauty of all the religious nonprofits and religious hospitals, we are serving. And so we also have to continue to tell our story more, to continue to tell the country the amazing work that those in the pro-life movement, those with pregnancy centers, those at Catholic Charities and religious nonprofits, we need to tell the story of what they have done and what they are doing, because it's not our work, it's the work that God has done. And that's what we're trying to continue to do.
Yeah, and it's so important for us to be aware, as opposed to, I know we're all busy and we're going through our lives and taking care of our families, but we have to be aware of what's happening in the culture, in the world. And if we're not, then our rights are going to be stripped from us. And depending on who gets in office, whether it be the midterm elections or the next presidential election, this can all be turned around very quickly. We've made a lot of strides, and which a lot of problems, of course, obviously with this administration. It's not perfect, but we've come a long way, and hopefully we can keep some of the gains that we have achieved during this administration beyond that. Lewis, great to talk to you, and look forward to having you on again real soon. We'll be right back to let you know what's coming up on a Thursday morning edition of Catholic Connection. Stay tuned. Thanks so much for joining us on a Wednesday morning edition of Catholic Connection. Great to be with you. Great to be back stateside. Although I was talking with Joan, I don't know if you heard our segment in the first hour, that Italy, as beautiful as it was really struggling the last month with, extreme heat. We had temperatures hitting 100 degrees in Umbria, and the real feel was like 107. So when it's like that, you can't even go outside because it's so oppressive. We spend a lot of time outside in any kind of outdoor space because it's so beautiful. We love to eat al fresco and, sit down with our coffee in the morning, or maybe a nice glass of wine in the evening and enjoy the beauty, but couldn't even do that. And I love to swim and I love to be outside, but again, so oppressive. So I'm glad to see that it's cool here. It's only going to be a high of 80 today in Michigan. And I'm like, woohoo! Feels like fall compared to what we experience. Okay, I digress. Coming up tomorrow, it's a Thursday, so we have Father Mitch Bakwa with 2 segments. And then we're also going to be taking a look at a beautiful effort by the Salesian Sisters in terms of their expansion and some special projects that they're working on as well. So I look forward to that. And also, of course, an update on the weather, which is going to be a big deal because there's all kinds of problems going on. I also wanted to remind you that today is a beautiful feast day. It is a feast, I forgot to mention this earlier, of Saint Mary Magdalene. And I love the way she is portrayed in the movie The Passion of the Christ. And by the way, they're going to be replaying that film in September, redistributing it before the Resurrection film. The follow-up comes out next year. Talk to you tomorrow. Ciao, ciao.